Without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on the product journey of an API. Let me give an introduction to acclaimed and admired speaker of tonight, Savitha Ajitraj. Savitha has over 12 years of experience in product management in multiple domains, including marketplaces, digital payments, consumer and seller protection, and e-commerce driving trust at scale. She has built several products, platforms in the startup and enterprise world. Currently, she is Group Product Manager for Global Resolution Experience at PayPal. She leads the AWIP, that is Advancing Women in Product, Chennai chapter. Savitha is also a core believer of sharing is caring and shares product management insights at various product forums and pursuing visiting faculty roles at Great Lakes Institute of Management for building the next gen of product leaders. A very warm welcome to you, Savitha. We are thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you now.
Thank you, Shama. Hope you can hear me fine.
Yes, Savitha, we can hear you. So you can share the screen as well now.
All right. As Murphy's Law, I had a power cut and it just came back.
We are thankful for that.
I predicted it. All right. I hope you guys can see my screen as well.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Shama, for inviting me here to share some of my experiences over a decade in learning and building products. Thank you, everyone who has joined this session, taking your precious time in learning and forming this community. Really appreciate it. Especially given the COVID times, I think we've all moved to a world where everything is virtual. And I'm glad that I have this opportunity here today. So Shama and I were discussing a while back what topic should I speak on. And something that evolved over the discussion was the product journey of an API. And the reason we picked this topic today was product management is definitely a growing and interesting field. But when it comes to APIs, there's still a lot of unknowns. And my personal journey in the last 4 years at PayPal has been of significant unraveling of what it takes to build a good API product. So I thought, why not share this with the community so that it's not just about the user experience that you can touch and feel, but behind the scenes, the platforms and the APIs that power these experiences matter equally important. So just a quick show of hands, if you can use the polls. How many of you are PMs already, or how many of you are aspiring PMs? This is for me to get a sense of the audience. Typically, if I'm in a room, I will just do a show of hands. Given the Zoom pattern, we're going to use these virtual polls. So once you've given your votes, we'll just get a good understanding of what kind of audience we have today.
So we'll just give them a few more seconds, Savitha. And one advantage with Zoom is we get the percentage and everything right. So we don't have to manually do it, right? So yeah, we have the results here. Could you see that?
Not yet. It still shows the question.
Okay. Now?
All right. So it's almost 50-50. Okay. So let me take me, to the next question that I have. How many of you, and give me an honest answer, right? How many of you think APIs is extremely technical in nature, and I don't think it requires a product management role? We just need the architects. And please be honest. An API is application programming interface. I'm assuming most of you know that because you've taken the time to join this session.
I'm sure the audience has done their own research before joining in.
Fantastic. At least 20 of you have been honest, saying that we don't need a PM. And some of you are saying, no, we do need a PM. And as usual, there are people in between, not taking a stand and saying maybe, right? Uh, there's no right or wrong answer, but I would say I was exactly in the same boat as 50% of you, thinking API is extremely technical in nature. We definitely need good architects to design API well, but we don't need a PM. In fact, just 4 years ago, when I was given this job, when I joined PayPal, my first question to my boss was, why have you hired me to manage this API? I am an experienced PM. I love playing with user experience, be it on mobile, be it on desktop, and all the new age innovations are coming up. I don't think I'm in the right role. And 4 years since then, I have discovered how wrong I was in terms of the perspectives that I had. And what I will share with you in the next 40 minutes is what I discovered personally, and also by talking to many other professionals, both in PayPal and in industry, of the critical role the PM plays for the success of an API product. So, with that, let me go with a simple introduction. I think Shama has already done a good job, so I can skip this. I'm there on LinkedIn if you have questions at a later point. Happy to answer them through LinkedIn messages as well. But what I intend to do today, I will speak more from a business angle, what it means to build an API and why it's relevant in the market and what it takes to build an API product. And specifically, we'll go deep into two sections, which is the journey and what are the different roles and responsibilities, both in building as well as launching an API. Last 10-15 minutes, we can take questions based on what I have shared so far or what you're facing in your respective jobs. So to me, the business view of an API is very, very simple, right? Um, if you go to a restaurant and you look at the menu of the restaurant and order some nice meal, and 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, the waiter gets you exactly what you ordered, and if you've gone to a nice restaurant, probably in a more presentable manner. Now, do you even think for a minute what actually it took to happen in behind the scenes in terms of the ingredients that are involved, the chefs that are involved, what kind of sourcing was done, what kind of inventory management is done to ensure the vegetables that are being used are all fresh, blah blah blah. No, as a customer, you don't really worry about what it takes inside the kitchen to get that beautiful meal on the on your plate, or now in the current world of Swiggy, right? All you want is the final product. APIs are very, very similar in nature. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes in terms of the platform, but ultimately, if all that complexities should be understood by the customer of an API, which people like you and me or these fancy developers that you see in the photo, then I'm sorry to say you're not doing a good job there. Because these developers are not serving you, they're serving an end customer, a business user, or an end user, and they're building experiences on top of those APIs. All they care about is what can this API do and how can I use this API. They're not worried about what are the internal details, internal platforms, internal backends or databases that are involved. All they care about is what is the final value that is being delivered and how can I use this to build additional value for my customers. So at any point of time, if you take that stand, you will be helping in building that API in a way that abstracts the internal complexities and keeps it simple and focused on the job or on the value it is expected to deliver. If we just keep that takeaway in mind and make our developers' life easy to use our APIs, we have hit home. So that's the first thing I would want us to take away in terms of what is the external view that we need to care about, and less about unfolding the internal complexities to the external developer audience. Now, all right, okay, so we can do that, but why should I care? Why should I actually really build this API in the right manner? There are many reasons. One of the key reasons, and especially why PMs are getting more into this, is the API allows you to scale exponentially. If you have your APIs publicly available, there are developers around the world who can build additional software applications on top of it and even monetize out of it. So if you are able to do that, you don't need to hire thousands and 10,000s of developers. All you have to do is solve one use case and host it publicly for the developer community in the world to consume it and build apps out of it. And if you do that, you create exponential value for your business. And that's the reason we're seeing today, as per this Forrester report, the growth of APIs, at 20%. And it's just going to increase more and more with the impact the pandemic has created for everybody to move digital. All right. Now let's go into more specifics. All right, okay, we need to build this, we need to build it in a platform way, and we need to get a lot of developers excited to build experiences on top of it and create value and really make it scalable. But as a PM, what's my role and responsibility? It's always easy if we have an analogy. So if you're building, say, a mobile app, okay, what is different about APIs, and let's compare that with the apps world. Simple. When it comes to a mobile app, it has a front end, right? I can install the app and I can see what's going on. I can book tickets, I can book restaurants, place order for food and whatnot, right? So it has a front end. The users can see and feel and interact with it. It's mostly built for end users, right? It's not built for developers. I mean, if it's an app for developers, then developer is your end user. And the most critical thing that you care about as a PM for your app is, how do I drive engagement? How do I ensure that I get a lot of installs of my app organically? And once they install it, they stay in the app and they don't uninstall it, right? So how do I ensure that my experience is sticky and is engaging? And there are many, many, many experiments that I would like to do with the design, with the content, with the look and feel, to see, which version works better and which version gives more user engagement and business value. So it's extremely experiment driven, and you want to test these behaviors right out in the world and figure out, how you keep on optimizing that experience. So that's the key mindset a PM has when it comes to building an experience-based product. Now let's compare with the API world. It's slightly different, right? First of all, you can't see an API like how you see an app. It's a platform talking to another platform through a RESTful kind of an interface. The value is driven by integration. For example, if I build this Maps API, which can give the weather of a particular location by lat long, and I open up that interface, API itself doesn't have any value. But if apps like weather.com or google.com, etc., integrate these APIs and figure out how to show that temperature, or whether it's going to rain and other information to the end user. The value is delivered when Google and other products integrate with my API and ultimately create the value for my end user, right? Which could be you and me. So the more integration you can capture, the more powerful integrations you can capture with your API, the power of your API grows with that. So in standalone, it doesn't fulfill any value. The value really comes by integration as against the engagement in the app world. Now, coming to specification and documentation, I'm in the philosophy that if you're building an app which is extremely fluid and easy to understand and intuitive, there shouldn't be a need for me to go through a help documentation on how to use your app. It's in contrast with an API world, because you're building it for the developers who ultimately are going to integrate and create value for end customers. They need to know in a much detailed way what your API does, how do I use your API, and the documentation should be up to date. Every time you introduce a change, it needs to reflect that in the documentation. So documentation is of paramount importance when it comes to building an API product, as against an app-based product where you want to have minimal documentation and more ease of use kind of focus. Stability. Now, if your API is not stable, right, and it's breaking every now and then, all the integrations that have been done, the customers will lose confidence. So it's okay if you want to take 6 months and have a release every 6 months, but it's not okay to have a release every 6 weeks, only to find out that every time you release, all the integrations break and the customers come back saying that, this is not stable. So stability over engagement, stability over experimentation. Last but not the least, backward compatibility. Once a customer has integrated with your API, there are very, very little chances that they will move or upgrade to a next version, which means no matter how many new versions you come up with, you need to, for good reasons, ensure that your APIs are compatible with the existing integrations, and any new functionality should be an add-on and should not be breaking the existing integration. So these are some of the nuances which are very different, which you mostly don't care about in the app world. And that's what makes this job slightly interesting, at the same time tricky. Having said that, there are a few fundamentals which, no matter what kind of a product you're building, all customers will care about. Is your product really performing well, right? In terms of all your non-functionals. Are you taken care of your security and all other aspects to ensure that it's robust, and these are non-negotiable. At the same time, if there's something wrong, is there a way for customers to report those issues and solicit that feedback so that you can continuously figure out what next you need to build for the roadmap and continue to delight your customers. So there are fundamentals, like, as a PM, I see the biggest value I bring to the table is building value out of technology for my customers. It doesn't matter, whether it manifests as an API or as an app, or it could be even a voice software. The value is key, but these are slight differences. And that's why I said, this world is still not understood as much as we would like it to be. And buddies like me are sharing that knowledge so that people start showing appreciation for product management for the API and invest accordingly. So the challenges, like I said, they don't have a visual impact. The documentation is one of the biggest problems, and it's not easy, right? You have to work with your technical writers to ensure that documentation reflects what this product really does, what business problems it solves, what are the use cases. An example, if I have to give you, if you're building a shopping API, which is going to create a shopping experience like what you have on Flipkart.com or eBay.com, right? If they exposing eBay shopping APIs or Flipkart shopping APIs, then the use cases might be very different. Somebody could be building another experience aggregating all the marketplaces, right? Or somebody could be just focusing on the integration with the shipping, right? So you need to demonstrate what are the various use cases and capabilities that you have in the documentation, and not just give the technical spec with respect to request and response and the JSON that comes with it. So the focus as a PM should be defining this input and output and focusing more on the business value that your developers can create for the customers of their own. It's less tangible, and there are always two types of users you need to have in mind. You definitely need to have the developers in mind because they are using your APIs and creating experiences out of it. And that doesn't mean that you forget the end user. You also need to interact with the customers of these developers, which could be, in the case of example of shopping APIs, shoppers, right? What are their needs? How do they shop? Do they shop by specific categories? Do they shop based on price? Do they shop based on availability? These are the things that they care about, and hence you need to build those use cases so that the developers who are building a shopping experience on top of APIs can actually fulfill the needs of the end users. So every time when I run my API product discovery, I don't start and stop with one user, which is the primary business user. I always have the business user and the developers in as a parallel study, and ensure that it's catering to both the segments in the right way, so that the developers can integrate with the API and create more value for my end users. Testing is another important aspect. I'm of the school of thought that product ultimately is accountable for the quality, and engineering and other stakeholders are your partners in this journey. And as a PM, before your product goes live, you need to test it and see whether it's really making sense from an end user perspective. And if possible, dog food with few of your fellow mates, invite few customers as beta, see if everything is okay, then have a full launch. So you need to test it again from your end user perspective as well as from developer's perspective. Now imagine if your use case is time bound, right? And in real world, it might take 7 days to actually see, whether the weekly charts are coming well or not. Now, that doesn't mean when the developer is integrating with my API, they're going to wait for 7 days to actually test that use case. So you need to give additional tools and skill sets to simulate some of these real life scenarios with dummy values. Good example, payments. I can't test, whether the payments are going okay or not okay in real banks when I'm testing the product, right? And actually lose money or make money in that process. So how do I, if I'm opening payment APIs, how do I allow them to test the credit card integration, test the bank integration? All of these need to be simulated and be available on the documentation so that the developer can certify, yes, it's working fine, and now is good to go live and do smoke test. So these are some of the additional nuances that needs to be taken care from testing standpoint. And here it's more focusing on standardization than differentiation. If you have 10 APIs in your organization, you don't want each of them having separate definition of, a particular concept, let's say money or currency. All of them need to follow the same consistency so that the developer who's using, say, 2 of these APIs, they don't get confused in doing the integration, and it shouldn't show or reflect the org chart of your company, right? So there has to be a governance within the organization, especially if you have multiple APIs exposed to your public developers, and as much as possible stick to the standard across the industry as well. So if REST is done in a particular way, you need to follow those standards and honor them. Otherwise, the developers will have a huge learning curve, and that will make your adoption really, really poor. And that's the last thing you want to have for your success. So if you don't have a dedicated PM who is really taking care of all of these, and you just leave it to the engineering team, there's a very good chance that they will build an awesome, kick-ass, technically sound API product, but only to figure out, because you've not done user discovery and you've not understood what the developer needs are and what the business users needs are, you will have an API which hardly fulfills the need of these users. Or even if you get, say, 2-3 big partners using your API because of some strategic business deals, they won't scale. Yeah, they will be limited to those partners because you built it very specifically for a partner rather than as a generic one, which can have a huge adoption. And during the integration, it will be a nightmare for you and the partner going through every aspect of it and ensuring that it's integrated well. And sometimes these course corrections can be expensive, right? You will always have to support what you have integrated with these big partners and maintain it, and then redo the whole thing as a new version, only to find out that these customers are never going to migrate because they don't have the time or money for it. And ultimately, the team will not see the customer empathy, which is what a PM is primarily responsible for, right? Bring the pain of your customers to the team so the team can creatively solve it. And that's where I believe, just like as an experience product or an app product needs a dedicated PM, so is the case with APIs. Now, having said that, you still need to set your strategy. You still need to set a vision and figure out, how are you going to lead the cross-functional teams for your product success. Each of the stakeholders, you have a bi-directional interaction: sales, marketing, design, research, customer, engineering, support, policy stakeholders, legal stakeholders, project management. They all are partners in the success of your product. But if they're going to move in 5 different directions because you don't have a common vision, then there's a very good chance that ultimately the value is going to be less zero. It's a very simple concept, which I learned from one of the presentations by HubSpot. It's called vector theory, right? And most of you, if you recall in your physics, right, vectors are directional in nature. So if I have 5 vectors moving all 1 centimeter in one direction, the tangible movement is 5 centimeters, 5x, right? But if all of them are moving in opposite directions, I might get 0 value. And that's not what you want for your product. So this is something, it's across the product management discipline, and API is no exception. You need to define what is going to be the strategy and how are you going to scale for your platform. How are you going to measure and grow your API adoption? How can you get more and more partners integrating with your APIs, more and more developers integrating with your API, and also, creating new use cases. So with every use case, how can you have more and more value delivered? That's ultimately what you need to form like a magnet, and then all these vectors are aligned to this great vision, and you work with sales and all other teams to sell your platform as a capability through the API interfaces. So that's the crux of the need of why you need an API PM, as well as what are the nuances of it and how it's slightly different and hence needs more attention. We'll spend few minutes on going through the value chain, which are 5 critical phases and iterative, right? Discovery, understanding who is your target market, who is the customer who's going to use it. If you're launching a API for subscriptions, right? Who are your customers? Is Netflix one of your customer? Are they going to use the subscription billing as your primary use case? So can you go after the entertainment industry? Can you go after the other cloud softwares available who are billing their customers on a periodic basis, right? So that homework has to be done. You don't build APIs in vacuum without knowing what's the business context. Who are your competitors? How are they doing their job better? And is there a way that you can differentiate? And then you go back to your whiteboards. Probably in this world, it's going to be a virtual whiteboard. You define these use cases. You work with your engineering team, and that's where the biggest difference comes. In the UX world, you have both engineers and designers in your conceptualization. Here, you have architects and technical lead playing a significant role in defining the API specs, and that's the output you have for the design. And this is the phase you really want to get it right the first time, because if you haven't got the design right, and it's really a partnership between the architect and the PM and the technical lead, you need to tell what are the use cases, what are the different use cases that's going to happen today and for the foreseeable future. Even if you're not building for the foreseeable future, are you designing it that it will allow it to scale without redoing these APIs, right? You don't want to keep on adding new parameters every time you figure out a new customer type is coming on board. You want to think about different customer types at the beginning itself. And of course, then goes the normal rhythm of, sprint or agile or whatever methodology you're following, and implementing it, testing it, and eventually doing an alpha or beta launch and release. And like how you measure any other product, you will get qualitative feedback as well as quantitative feedback in terms of the adoption. Is it how much time it's taking to integrate, and how easy or difficult it is to integrate, and ultimately the problem that you wanted to solve with the business users, right? So for business users, if you wanted to grow their revenues by making subscriptions easy by 20%, you can actually, go back to your APIs and see whether really that value is being generated or not, because that's the ultimate success your business stakeholders will care about. They'll care less about, how easy it is for developers. But if it's the other way around, if it's too difficult and the business users are getting a lot of complaints, then they'll care about that as well. But ultimately, they'll care about the business value that you're creating out of these APIs. So this is where when we designed it in PayPal, one of the APIs, we spent significant amount of time talking to customers. In our case, the customers were of different segments. We had marketplaces, we had large enterprises, and we also had small and medium-sized businesses and partners behind whom there are a lot of partners, SMBs coming. So we spoke to all of them, understood, how we can help them automate some of the back office tasks that they were doing. And we actually measured it to see, with customer case studies, did they really optimize the back office tasks and gain efficiency as the primary measure of success. But the secondary measure of success was how many large enterprises were adopting and integrating with our API. How many partners are integrating behind whom we are getting 10,000s or millions of small, medium-sized businesses, and so on and so forth. So depending on the context, you need to go and define what would that success be for you and your team. But everything that you do for any other product is equally relevant for an API product, and the primary difference comes in the design phase. So we'll just go, as an example, the shopping APIs, right? So So what do I really mean understanding the developer use cases and understanding the shoppers use cases? So if I have to build a shopping API, which does the aggregation of all the e-commerce websites and, have one website, then, or one API, which can search across the e-commerce websites and tell me whether I have a particular product or not, then that's the search use case. Some users, they just come to website for browsing and get inspiration and then purchase it, right? So then that's another use case that I have to cater from a shopper's point. It cannot be just always a search use case. Well, some users may just want to try it, right? If I'm buying spectacles from lenscart.com, I want to try it and then see if I want to make the payment or not, or just return the product. And does my shopping API actually facilitate that trial use case? Some shoppers would like to see detailed reviews before they make a purchase. Do I have the ability to share the reviews through these APIs and allow my developers to create experiences on top of it? Do I allow them to log in or sign up so that if I have to do future purchases, I don't have to give my address again and again, and ultimately do the transaction and the post transaction, which could be if there are some returns or refunds, all of those. So this is what is my shopper's journey, and if I'm building this for end users, my APIs need to have a powerful search use case functionality. It should be able to search and filter by price, by auto suggest, and all of those things, right? I need to create that capabilities and allow them to browse by categories, like look at books, look at fashion, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so this is how you kind of look at the technical aspect of it and build it in your API, but ultimately it's the end user use case that you're solving for. Do I have to do all of this on day one? The answer is no. I mean, it's always good to start with the most important problem that you're going to solve, and then naturally extend it to the surrounding or adjacent use cases, right? And that's what we did when we built it for the back office. We had both consumers and sellers on the PayPal platform. We started with the seller use case, and within the sellers, we targeted specifically marketplaces and large enterprises. And we knew that they care more about automation and less about the chatty interface that's required for doing some of these back office tasks. So we prioritized those automation use cases, and then eventually expanded it over a period of time. So it took 2 years to get our product to general availability for the large masses like SMBs, and eventually the consumers as well. But in that process, so far we haven't retired anything, but eventually you will reach a point where you will also deprecate the old versions. It's always a painful journey. If you have even 2 customers on an old legacy version, it's very difficult to contract them out and ask them to move to the newer version. So we were very, very cognizant of that and built it in such a way that it's backward compatible. So anything that comes as a new version is always backward compatible with the version 1.0, which went live and public. So again, like I said, focusing on the value is the most important thing, and how easy you make it for your business users. All the shopping use cases, right? If you just give me what I ask, like I want a pair of shoes, and if you just do that, then you're probably doing the lowest value. But if you're able to predict based on what I'm searching, probably this is the best pair which will match with this particular accessory that you purchased, then I'm predicting, I'm helping you with the outcome. More important, or going further, I'm prescribing, right? How to handle it. and ultimately I'm automating it. So wish you are in a world with this pandemic, all your grocery comes exactly at the time when you need it, and you don't have to go to the shop, you don't have to go to any websites and any shoppers API integrations, and it's all automated based on your needs. That's the ultimate value that you want to deliver. Like I said, you may not want to aspire for that on day one, but eventually build the road. And that's where a lot of insights and automation can be driven based on AI. And all of that can be encapsulated or exposed as an API use case if you were to build a shopping API as your product. So that's just to give some, real life meaningful example of how you can think about increasing the value, reduce the load for your end users and your developers, make it easy to integrate, and automatically the value goes up, and hence the adoption goes up, and so on and so forth. Now, launch, very, very critical part. When do you know you're ready to launch? I've got the code ready, all my functional tests are working. Can I go live? The answer is no. With API, like I said, you have to get it right the first time, and you want to build it in such a way that it can scale. These are the things that you need to take care as I would say a checklist before you decide to make your APIs public. If you're going to keep it limited audience, then it's okay. But if you're going to make it generally available, you don't want to be in a point where there are a lot of support issues. And a good example that always comes to my mind to make this point clear is, if you recall the very first edition of the Big Billion Days, right? It was not designed, or it didn't scale for the humongous population of India, right? And people got more frustrated. Probably they had more support calls, and that's simply because they launched it before they were ready. And once that impression is framed, it's very, very difficult for users to forgive you and say, okay, I'll give you a second chance. So because that's the level of impatience we've reached with our users, and everybody wants world-class experience, you have to get it right the first time. And then you really want to scale and make it publicly available. You want to ensure by that time, everything that can be done to reduce the load on your community, on your developers. You don't want everyone bombarding you with a lot of questions during the integrations. You want to take a phase-wise approach and build all of these, and gradually, say I'm GA. That's why I said, in our case, we took 2 years, but for the right reasons. You may not know all the test cases that you need to document on day one. You hand glove some of the customers, marquee customers, in the first 6 months of your journey. Understand how are they validating their success, and incorporate all of those learnings into test case suite, and then make it available on your developer portal. You need to have a staging environment, which I'll call as sandbox, which is available not for your internal testing, but for the developers who are testing your APIs. If something goes wrong, they need to have troubleshooting tools, and they also should be able to simulate most of the data so that they can self-certify, rather than working with you and your engineering team to see whether my integration is right. Yeah, if you have only 2-3 partners, you can go that route. But if you're going to talk about millions of developers using your API globally, that hardly scales. Documentation, like I said, most bad APIs stop with API spec and sample code, but good APIs will have the use cases, the scenarios, because the developers won't know how your internal systems work or business cases work, right? If I'm building a subscription software, what are the different ways of approaching subscription, and how can I change my subscription? How can I upgrade my subscription? All of those use cases need to be documented and need to have a corresponding API request and response. You also need to see some of the best practices that your early customers have adopted and got value out of it, and share that knowledge on your developer portal for general audience, so everybody can adopt these best practices. You will get a lot of questions in the first few phases of integration, but you want to take the time to not only answer them, but actually curate them into an FAQ document. Say, these are the kind of questions that I get. Then, use those to create a very nice external and internal FAQ. External is for the public, internal is for your internal stakeholders like account managers or professional services or other team members who also ask these questions. And yeah, the last thing you want is, if something is wrong with your API, a customer coming and telling you that it's not stable, it's not working. So you need to have, live monitoring, proactive alert mechanisms, troubleshooting, admin tools for sandbox, support processes, discussion forum, all of that set from an operationalization perspective, so that finally when you're making it GA, you're ready, your team is ready, your company is ready, and all the staff, including the support staff, is ready to really go to market. And then you work with your marketing team to get your SEO story, to see how your APIs stand up when somebody is Googling, and for the specific keywords, like I said, in the case of shoppers, what are they searching for? Do my shopping API so, or a competitor shopping API? So how do I get all of that traffic organically and build the SDKs and the training suite and demos and marketing collaterals, keeping, again, the business language in mind, because your sales team will least be interested in the technical story, but what is the business value that you're creating, which will allow them to sell your platform or capabilities. So those are the kind of things. It looks a lot, but it is what it is. And it's always a teamwork. So I had the opportunity to work with wonderful partners in PayPal in creating some of these collaterals firsthand, and training the professional services and making the integration easy for them and for our customers. But once you get it right, 4 years down the line, the effort to create value exponentially just happens automatically. You can start focusing on other use cases and move on. So it's hard work, but it does eventually pays the result. So with that, I'll just leave these 2 slides for you to read what makes an API good. And these are the things that we have learned from our developers. And when I mean the developers, not inside, but outside, who are using some of these APIs. Like I said, they care more about the features, and they should know what calls to make, and they want to focus more on business logic and business value, rather than figuring out all the technical coding issues because you're not built the API right. So that's what makes a good API. Similarly, what makes an API bad? Poor documentation and deprecated documentation. Okay, you got an amazing version, but you never bother to keep it up to date every time you enhance it. Even that makes the customer unhappy. No clear explanation of use cases, right? Just the basics. So, and very difficult to make the first call. You want to make it as easy, the developer experience, so that API calls can be made quickly. And mostly, the developers are evaluating before they decide to use your API. So can you help them evaluate? And based on the simplicity of the integration and the evaluation mode, they're going to decide whether they're going to use these or not. It's not just the pricing that always determines the choice of product. These days, developers and the technical teams work with the business teams in making some of these decisions. So you want to ensure that the APIs that you're building are well received and by both the business users as well as the technical users, and ultimately get more and more adoption. So with that, coming to almost a wrap of the session, focus on researching developer and user needs before you say, all right, let's go and build something, right? It's important to focus on stability over experimentation when it comes to APIs. and the strategy should align, right? What are the first few use cases that you want to go live with needs to align with your product strategy, and work with your go-to-market and launch teams, and apply all the basics, which can take a while, sometimes as minimum as 6 months, but it's worth it, so that when you are launching, you don't have to have that nightmarish experience of big billion days, right? And eventually move up the value chain by giving more and more, um, by solving more and more using data and insights, and help your customers automate, as well as simplify their life, and ultimately improve the adoption. So with that, not sure how we're doing on time, Shama, but
Thank you for delivering a brilliant session, Savitha. Really great insights. And I'm afraid we have 5 minutes and we have like a million questions to go. So I hope you have a little more time for us, Savitha, here. So without any further delay, I'll get to the next part of the session. Many curious minds have joined us here today. So give me a moment to share my screen. Meantime, Savitha, you could go through the questions in the Q&A window and we can get started.
yeah, and I'm so sorry, I do have a hard stop, so 3 minutes is what I have.
Okay.
But let's, like I said, I mean, I can take questions offline. Let me, okay, this is a good one. References. So if you have,
Which question is that, Savitha, so that I could announce it to the audience as well? Which are you looking at? Which question are you looking at?
can I please suggest books or courses to develop this skill? Yeah.
Okay.
So I do have some references. Let me flash my screen again. Can you give me the sharing?
Sure.
Yeah. I always like this when somebody asks a question for which you have a slide. So I hope you can see my screen, Kritika, or whoever wanted this.
Right. That was Kritika. We have a few more questions around that same thing, the tools and the resources that you would suggest.
Yeah, please take a quick screenshot of this. APG is one of my favorite go-to resource. They have amazing videos on YouTube. I learned a lot in my early days, and I still go through them. Please subscribe to this, and they have an amazing, material. It's now acquired by Google, and yeah, that I would say is like the ultimate source for somebody who wants to go really deep. What I shared is like probably a 10,000 feet high level overview, but if you really want to go deep into this subject, I would go and subscribe to APG, and you can look at some of these others as well.
So we'll take this one question, Savitha, from Anirudh. How does a product manager manage the usage of third-party APIs? Is it advisable to reduce the dependency? Would a product manager also own or be accountable to third-party APIs, especially when there are issues from their side?
So this question is if you are consuming a third-party API, if I understand it right. Okay. Like I said, if your business is built on what you're exposing, and underneath, there's a third-party API which is solving some of the problems, ultimately the customer who's integrated your API doesn't know it, right? And they will hold you accountable for it. And that's why in the evaluation phase, you want to be very, very critical and look at only those third-party APIs that are reliable and have good customer testimonials. So that's more from a customer point. I would answer this question.
Okay. We'll take 2 more questions, if that's okay.
No, I'm sorry. I do have a hard stop.
Right. Let's close the session with one last insight from your end. How much of a technical learning curve you went through while doing discovery? He wants, Karan Shukla is asking this question. He wants to know your experience in this. How did you decide that a specific API will need to be scalable? And more importantly, which one will not be?
Yeah, this is a question that always comes, right? How technical I need to be. It's okay if you don't have a technical background when you start, but you need to be comfortable to a point that you can have a dialogue with your engineering team in a comfortable way, right? You shouldn't feel, oh, this is too technical in nature and just shy away from the conversation. You'll never be in the right books. So even if you don't have a technical expertise, I would say you need to read a little bit of it, be inquisitive, be curious, and be open. At the same time, will this scale to so many distributed systems or not? That kind of scalability architecture questions, rely on your engineering team to solve. But you tell them, how much are you expecting in terms of growth? I'm expecting 1 million calls per week after 6 months, right? That's the kind of input or insight they would expect from a PM. And as far as you can give that and have the dialogue to make it scalable, I think that should be sufficient in my personal experience.
Great. So in view of the time constraints and Savita's especially time constraint here, we will have to end the Q&A. But audience, I will forward all your questions to Savita over an email, and only then we'll be able to pick the best question. And the last part of the session, which I mentioned, will get a free digital course. I will declare the winner tomorrow, and the free digital course will be rewarded to them.
Thank you
So,
once again.
right. So, and one more thing, audience, please scan this QR code for your one-on-one session with Savita or any industry practitioner of your choice. We have enjoyed having you with us, Savita, and it's been a complete pleasure. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. So if you scan the QR code on the certificate, it will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that we have created for you. It will hold the recording of the session. Please share it within your network, and we'll do the same on our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. And audience, thank you for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. Do not forget to register for the webinar on 9th, and please fill out the feedback forms which you will find in the chat window. It'll help us a great deal to do better in our future webinars, and your opinions matter to us. So please take the effort to fill out the feedback form. And with that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled, and see you all on 9th of March. Have a great night.